Hey everyone, it's Kathis, and today we've got a really big video on solar, so I want to keep this intro pretty short. Really quick, I do have a Discord that we just created. Great place to ask questions, find fire teams, all that. It's awesome. You should join. Link is in the description. And just a quick disclaimer on this video, this is not going to be showing you the best builds to run. This is to show you how the subclass works. So if you're new or returning, or maybe you don't really understand how solar works, this is a really good video for you, and it might be good if you're just looking to check out what some of the other classes offer if you're not familiar with how they work. So with that being said, let's get right into it. Solar is all about burning, healing, and increasing your damage output. When you master it, you can become pretty much unstoppable as everything around you ignites, clearing large areas in a matter of seconds. To start, let's do a general overview of the subclass screen. This is how all of our subclasses look now, by the way, so if you're new or returning and have no idea what everything here means, then you are in the right place. Alright, on the top left, you've got your super abilities that you can choose from. The abilities section contains your class abilities, so think Titan Barricades, Hunter Dodge, and Warlock Healing Rifts. You can also change your jumps, melee abilities, and grenades here. As always, I like to remind everybody that all subclass grenades are now available to each class. Next up, aspects. Aspects are class-specific abilities that alter your subclass on more of a macro level. Aspects also dictate how many fragments you can equip based off of which ones you choose. And you can view this amount when hovering over the aspect. It lets you know right here. And don't worry, we will go more in depth into all of the aspects for each class later on in the video. Lastly, fragments are non-class specific abilities that are for the most part passive buffs that you can just get while playing. Oftentimes they are do this, then this happens type of effects. Taking the time to really develop a thought out combination of aspects, fragments, and everything on this screen will result in significantly improved combat power and effectiveness. Don't just copy and paste someone's loadout and expect everything to instantly work and be super powerful. Building a synergy that fits your specific playstyle is the most important thing to take away here. Another component that comes with all of the 3.0 subclass overhauls are what Bungie calls keywords. Think of keywords as the basic fundamental mechanics of the subclass. Keyword effects are totally universal between classes, but each class has their own ways that they can manipulate and work with them. With Solar, we have 5 keywords that we can utilize: Scorch, Ignite, Radiant, Restoration, and Cure. Let's first do a brief overview of what these keywords are, and then we'll show all of the ways that they can synergize within the subclass and also through weapons. Scorch is our first keyword, and it's pretty straightforward. Scorch is a damage over time burn effect. There are many ways that we can enhance Scorch, but for now let's just cover it at its base level. When we scorch an enemy enough, they will eventually ignite, which is our second keyword. Ignitions occur after enough Scorch is applied from any source. Radiant is next, and it's basically just a flat 25% damage boost on a timer indicated on your buff screen. When you have your build set up correctly, you should have Radiant up almost all the time if that's what you're going for, which is a very good way to utilize Solar. Finally, we have our 2 healing keywords. Cure is a quick instant heal which can come in clutch when you're really close to death, and Restoration is an active heal over time effect. Restoration is nice because you will continue to heal as long as it's active, meaning that you will technically be healing through the damage you're taking. So now that we understand what the keywords are, let's talk about how we can use them and how to initiate them. And remember, we are still going over everything universal, so all of the section's information applies to whatever class you're running, so Titan, Hunter, Warlock, okay, you get it. Let's tackle Scorch and Ignite together. I'm going to combine these two because they essentially go hand in hand with one another, with Scorch being the part 1 and Ignite being the part 2. All things that Scorch will eventually ignite when enough Scorch is applied, so just keep that in mind. Another thing to note here is that in lower level content, it is actually kind of difficult to ignite because everything dies so quickly. You will mostly just be killing enemies before they have a chance to ignite, unless it's a boss. So don't think you're doing something wrong if nothing is igniting when you're running Vanguard strikes or something. So how do we Scorch? Well, every grenade besides the healing grenade will Scorch. And don't worry, we will cover grenades in more detail later on in the video. Also, the weapon trait Incandescent, found only on certain solar weapons, will cause final blows with that weapon to spread Scorch to nearby enemies. This will synergize fully with Solar 3.0, so any Scorch-related fragments will be factored in when using Incandescent, which is really awesome. According to a recent This Week at Bungie, more affinity-specific traits will be making their way to the game at some point, but as of right now, the only Solar-specific trait is Incandescent. A few exotics do innately have Scorch as well, like Prometheus Lens. I normally don't talk too much about exotics in these videos, but I figured they were worth mentioning because it's literally a Scorch source, so now you know. So with all that being said, Scorch from all of these sources will end up leading to an ignition after 100 Scorch stacks are applied. There isn't a way in-game right now to show how much Scorch is stacked on each enemy. People have figured it out, but long story short, you'll be doing so much Scorch that you mostly will never need to calculate exactly how much Scorch you're outputting, so just don't worry about it. Okay, so now that we know how to trigger Scorch and ignitions, let's talk about how we can enhance them through the fragments we have available to us. Ember of Singeing recharges our class ability when we Scorch targets. This is a very noticeable effect and is a solid fragment with how often we will be scorching enemies. Ember of Combustion causes our solar super final blows to ignite and also gives plus 10 strength. Ember of Char will spread Scorch to nearby targets and also gives plus 10 discipline. This is awesome for continuous chaining of Scorches and ignitions, especially in higher level content. Ember of Eruption increases the area of effect radius of ignitions and also gives plus 10 strength. Ember of Ashes applies more Scorch stacks to targets. There is almost no build where you don't want this on, especially for higher level content. More Scorch stacks means quicker ignitions, which means more explosions. Ember of Wonder generates an orb of power from rapidly igniting enemies and gives plus 10 resilience. With how easy it is to get your super energy through so many other ways, this is a total waste of a fragment in my opinion, so don't use it. And our last Scorch/Ignite fragment is Ember of Searing, which gives melee energy for defeating scorched targets. Another very popular fragment, especially for Titans with a throwing hammer. Let's move on to our buff effects now, starting with Radiant. There is only one universal way to become Radiant, and that's through the fragment Ember of Torches. This is another fragment that should be in pretty much every build you run. Being able to easily get a 25% damage bump while using any one of the Solar's very powerful melee abilities is awesome. As for Cure and Restoration, there is also just one universal way to trigger these, and it's through the Healing Grenade. Each class does have their own ways that they can initiate these, and we will get there, but for right now, let's just keep working our way through all the universal ways that we can do stuff. Alright, now here is how we can enhance those three. Ember of Benevolence will grant increased ability regeneration if we apply Restoration, Cure, or Radiant to an ally, but lowers Discipline. Ember of Empyrean extends the duration of Radiant and Restoration when getting solar kills from any source, but lowers Resilience. I really like this one. Ember of Solace increases the duration of Radiant and Restoration, which is very similar to Empyrean. The difference here is that Solace just gives you more time at the start, while Empyrean will refresh the timer every time you get a solar kill. So whatever you prefer here, just pick one. Cool, so those are the ways that we can trigger and manipulate the keywords universally. We have just a few fragments left that aren't tied to any keywords, so let's cover those really quick. We've only got 2 fragments in Solar that don't have any keyword synergy, and both are not great, but let's just cover them anyway. Ember of Beams increases the target acquisition of our Solar super projectiles and gives plus 10 intellect. Just keep in mind that you will have to use a super that has solar projectiles, so don't use this one if you're a Well of Radiance Warlock, obviously. Ember of Tempering grants increased recovery for a short time, stacking up to 3 times, and also increases airborne effectiveness while giving minus 10 recovery. I believe how this one works is that each stack of Ember of Tempering is 10 recovery, so you could technically have 100 recovery with only 70 as long as you can maintain 100% uptime of Ember of Tempering times 3. Solar gives us 8 grenades to work with, and again, all are available to every class. Make sure you pick up the missing grenades from visiting Ikora, and make sure to pick up all of the fragments that you're missing from her as well. They are pretty expensive, but eventually you'll be able to work your way through all of these. Trip mine grenades stick to any surface and will stay on that surface for a little while before detonating and give a moderate amount of scorch. Incendiary grenades are super hot grenades that can burn enemies on impact and will cause heavy amounts of scorch when it detonates. Solar grenades explode on impact and linger for a few seconds, scorching anything inside it. Swarm grenades also detonate on impact, but they split into mini drones that seek out nearby targets. Swarm grenades slightly scorch targets. Fusion grenades are your solar sticky grenades. They stick to enemies and will detonate after a couple of seconds, dealing a moderate amount of scorch. Firebolt grenades are similar to arc bolt grenades. When they land, they detonate after about a second and will send a bolt of solar light out that damages a nearby target, slightly scorching them. Thermite grenades are the wall of fire grenade, lighting up to 4 times. These are nice for clearing out large areas. And finally, you have the healing grenade, which will cure on impact and will also apply active restoration for a few seconds. Now it's time to get into the class-specific stuff with Solar and how Solar works with the melee abilities, aspects, and super abilities. Let's start with the Solar Titan, or the Sunbreaker. Sunbreakers are overwhelmingly powerful and have pretty much on-command healing, scorching, and are as close to unkillable as you can get in the game. We've got 2 melees to choose from. Hammer Strike is the Titan's shoulder charge ability and will scorch the target. It will also ignite the target if they are defeated with it. Throwing Hammer is the other melee we've got, and it allows us to not only throw our hammer for really nice damage and range, but will also cure us when we pick it up after hitting a target. So this means that you can instantly get it back when you pick it up, and you can instantly heal yourself as long as you're hitting targets. Aspects next, and we've got 3 to choose from, and they all grant 2 fragment slots each. Soul Invictus is incredible, making us unkillable Giga Chads and is one of the strongest aspects in the entire game. Every solar ability Final Blow, Super Impact, or Scorch Kill will create a sunspot, and standing in these sunspots gives us increased ability regeneration, while also draining our super more slowly. If that wasn't good enough, the sunspots also scorch anyone inside. So it damages everyone and replenishes your abilities quicker and drains your super slower. So just insane. Consecration, the second aspect, is the Titan's slide plus melee ability that is also incredibly strong. Just slide, then use melee to launch a flame wave towards enemies, which scorches everything it touches. Then you can melee again to slam the ground, launching a larger flame wave. This second wave will instantly ignite any scorched enemy too, so anything we can scorch in the first wave will ignite and explode everything. The third and final aspect is Roaring Flames, which increases our solar ability damage as long as we get solar ability kills. This will stack up to 3 times and works with every solar ability, including your super. And speaking of super abilities, we've got 2 to work with here. Hammer of Soul and Burning Maul. Hammer of Soul is an awesome throwing hammer super that shatters on impact, exploding again. You can launch these pretty far, they do a lot of damage, and this is a really good ranged super ability. Not the best for boss damage, but still really good. Burning Maul summons a giant molten hammer that we can use to either slam the ground and send out a ranged flame cyclone that seeks out enemies, or spin it to do tons of damage, especially to bosses, burning everything in sight. Solar Titan is so strong. There's just so much potential to create endless sunspots to constantly heal, regenerate abilities, and continuously scorch and ignite enemies. You just can't go wrong with Solar Titan. Hunters, you've got quite a bit to cover here, so let's get right into it. The Gunslinger overall is the solar class that truly makes you feel like an awesome knife-wielding, precision-shooting, gunslinging monster, along with having access to the highest damage super in the entire game. You have 4 melee abilities to choose from, all centering around throwing knives. First, you've got the lightweight knife. This deals moderate damage and will make you radiant for a few seconds, potentially eliminating the need for using Ember of Torches that makes you radiant with melee damage, so if you're using this, you don't need to use that fragment. Next, you've got the weighted throwing knife, which is a bit of a slower throw, but will deal more precision damage and will cause scorched targets to immediately ignite. Precision kills with this knife will also replenish your class ability. Knife Trick will throw a fan of knives out that scorch enemies you hit, making it very easy to become radiant if you're running Ember of Torches. And lastly, you have the Proximity Explosive Knife, which can largely be considered a trip mine grenade. This is a very strong melee ability, especially when paired with the Caliban's Hand exotic. The explosions here are massive, and it's just really cool to watch. Moving on to aspects, again, we have 3 to work. Knock 'em Down is a nice aspect that enhances our supers, which is really good in its own right, but is also extremely powerful in how it instantly replenishes your melee ability every time you get a throwing knife kill, and gives 2 fragment slots. You can seriously chain as many knife kills together as you want, as long as each throw ends on a kill. On Your Mark grants 3 fragment slots and dramatically increases you and allies' weapon handling and reload speed with precision final blows. Or, you also have the ability to just dodge and instantly get max stacks of this. This makes gunplay with the Hunter truly feel like you're a gunslinger, like I was mentioning. It's really fun. The final aspect is Gunpowder Gamble, which allows you to charge up a throwable solar explosive that can be shot midair by just getting solar kills from just about any source, but only grants 1 fragment slot. Shooting this midair will cause an ignition that covers a pretty nice area. For supers, you have 3 to choose from. Golden Gun Marksman summons a molten hand cannon that deals massive precision damage and will do even more damage when you're radiant. Golden Gun Deadshot is very similar, but is instead a rapid fire golden gun that refunds a bullet if you get an ignition and will also benefit from being radiant. Lastly, Blade Barrage is, in my opinion, the best option overall for PvE, and deals huge amounts of damage by launching a volley of blades that can cover a huge area or will just track to a boss. Alright, last but not least, time to finish up with Warlocks. Dawnblade Warlock is largely an S-tier support class that can also output amazing damage while providing great support for you and your fire team with the Well of Radiance super especially, which is what you will be running 99% of the time you're in PvE. Warlock is interesting here in that you actually can get a unique class ability with Solar, Phoenix Dive. This allows you to dive to the ground, curing you and allies, and benefits from having the Heat Rises aspect, giving you restoration and also scorching enemies on impact. As for melees, you've got 2 to work with. Celestial Fire is a long-range melee ability that sends out 3 quick bursts of solar light that scorches enemies. Incinerator Snap is similar to the Hunter's Knife Trick and sends out a fan of sparks that will explode and also scorch targets. Both of these melees are great options. Use whatever you prefer. Moving on to aspects, again, we've got 3 to work with, and just like Titan, each one grants 2 fragment slots. Icarus Dash will allow you to instantly change your momentum direction midair just through a dodge. You also get an additional dodge if you're using the Heat Rises aspect, and getting kills while midair will automatically cure you, so a lot going on here. And speaking of Heat Rises, that's our second aspect, it will firstly allow you to fire weapons, throw grenades, and melee while mid-air. The Heat Rises buff, however, has a lot more than that going on. You can hold your grenade button to consume it, granting a quick cure to you and allies. If you have a healing grenade equipped though, it will increase the strength of the burst. Lastly, any final blows you get while airborne will increase the duration of Heat Rises and will also grant melee energy. I know that's a lot. Your final aspect is Touch of Flame, which enhances 4 of the grenades. You should pretty much always be using this. Fusion grenades are extremely powerful, especially with the Starfire Protocol exotic chest piece that grants an additional grenade charge. Every grenade's power here is hugely increased. You can't go wrong with this equipped. Just make sure you have the grenade that's listed here within the aspect, otherwise it's useless. Finally, let's move on to supers, and you'll have 2 to choose from. Daybreak is a roaming super that allows you to throw flaming swords that detonate on impact. This will be mostly used in PvP in my opinion, and it's pretty good. Next, Well of Radiance is one of the most used supers in the entire game, and many fire teams won't even run raids without 1 or 2 people using this. This is also really good in PvP. You'll thrust a massive solar sword into the ground, scorching enemies on impact. The sword will then generate a well of light, which the whole fire team can take advantage of for massive restoration to stay healed, and radiant to do 25% more damage. This is awesome for any boss encounter, or for those panic moments in Grandmaster Nightfalls where you just need instant healing. Well, that is it for Solar. I know it was a lot to cover as all the subclasses are very in-depth now. My biggest piece of advice is just to be really mindful about which aspects and fragments you're choosing, as choosing stuff at random or copying a friend's without knowing the flow of the build will not help you at all. The best builds will have an intentional gameplay loop around them that makes them very powerful. Knowing what you have equipped is massively important in making you dominate content. I really hope this helped you understand Solar just a little bit better. We've got 3 subclasses down with only Void left to go for my guides, and Strand is now on the horizon in just a few more months. Alright, well that is it for now everyone. I will see you all in the next video. Thanks so much for sticking by.